If you guys minted a Chex VV earlier this year for the cost of a simple gas fee on Ethereum, at its peak you could have turned a couple of dollars into several $1,000s. Multiple gains. Now, if you minted a Opepen, you could have turned a simple gas fee. It was literally a free mint and you only had to pay the gas fee. It was a couple dollars. You could have turned a couple of dollars into, at its peak, or now it's been over 1 ETH, to, well, several $1,000s. But what's so significant about this story of Opepenai and Chex, and who is Jack Butcher? In today's video, I'm going to be going over the story of Jack Butcher, what is Opepenai, how you can play it, and what is Chex VV. First, let's go ahead and start with Jack Butcher. Jack Butcher has over 272,000 Twitter followers, but it didn't start like this. In fact, his company started out as Visualize Value, and they currently have over 370,000 subscribers. The take to prominence for Visualize Values was creating these black and white little portraits and like these little squares that were kind of considered a meme, to where a picture is worth 1,000 words. Here's an example of one of his popular ones. This was with truth, bias, and then perception. As you can see here, there's 3 words on here. It's a small little square, but the picture is worth 1,000 words. Where you see this and you're like, okay, well, this is what the truth is. This is what our bias brings into play, and it blocks out some of the truth. And this is what we perceive to see, whereas we're missing all of this because of our bias getting in the way. And there are several others that are similar to this. Like an example of this is pointless. And yeah, I agree. All of this is actually pointless. But until you get here and where you have exponential growth, this is where it's actually worth it. So it's kind of one of those things. Are you going to stop at the last piece before you hit that gold mine when you're digging in the ground? Or are you going to keep going till you find the gold? And this is the same thing with that. Don't stop, keep going until you receive and reach that exponential growth. By the way, if you guys are already up to date with all of this stuff with Chex, already up to date with Opepen, already know who Jack Butcher is, you can go ahead and check out the time stamps in the description below so you guys can filter through and pick which parts of the video that you want to see. And then you have something like this that says repetition, and repeats a bunch, but then the last one says reputation. Now, what does this mean? Well, reputation is your actions and what you do repetitively, and you want to keep a strong reputation. And well, you can ruin a reputation in a couple of seconds, whereas it takes years to build a reputation. But you can just look at all these other things. Like an example is bull, bear, and then a builder. The builder, which is no audio, it doesn't care. There's no directionality in the market. He's not even listening. It's muted. He does his thing. Whereas a bull market, it's just noise. A bear market, it's just noise. And a builder just continues going. So this is basically the state of provenance for Visualize Value. And he built a following, and there was growth behind this. Now, this is where we get into Jack Butcher and the Chex, as well as Opepenai. This is basically something that was one of those things where it's like, hey, look, I like to create things, I like to disrupt things, and this is something that I wanted to do. So then he started with something called Chex. So Chex, you can kind of look at it like art with game theory. Now, how these checks work is there was an initial supply of 16,000, well, actually a little over 16,000 checks. And how this would work is if you wanted to have a lower amount of checks, you would have to burn 2 individual checks to get a 40 check, and then those 2 40s to make a 20, those 2 20s to make a 10, and then so on. So basically the TLDR is that there's only ever going to be 3 black checks. And this took to prominence when the Twitter blue check was coming out. This is a really good visual to explain how this would work. With the checks, again, you have a total supply a little over 16,000. How this would work is simply if I wanted a 40 check square, I would need to burn 280 checks. So in general, there's only going to be 8,000 of these 40 check squares, or a little bit over 8,000. As you can see here, there's going to be 8,014, and currently there's 355. Now, if I wanted to get to the 20 checks, which is going to be something like this, I would burn 220 checks and get to the 10 checks, which is going to be here. And there's only going to be a total of 2,010 checks. And then you get to the 5, which is only 1,000. Then you get to the 4, which is only 500. And then the 1, which is there's only 250. And then, of course, in order to get the black check, Jack kind of threw like a monkey wrench into all of it, is that the largest and final piece in the collection is the black check. It requires 64 single checks to produce the 4,096 editions. So only 3 will ever be possible. And if you simply calculate this and figure out how this is done, because again, you have to have 64 single checks, 250 divided by 64 is going to give you like 3.83. So there can only be 3 black checks, which is basically like the top tier. And of course, some people may be able to get it, some people may not. It will take a lot of accumulation in order to do that. The sales on the checks are pretty pricey. So with this, you can actually just go ahead and check out the checks.art/stats. I'll leave a link in the description below to go ahead and see the updates to see where everything is at. But right now, we have a total supply of 11,719 checks, just calculating in all the amount of checks that have been burned and what the supplies are for each of these. As you can see, there's actually not a lot of the 4 checks. I guess you can kind of consider these guys like the middle class, to where people are accumulating the 80, 40, and 20. And if they are looking to proceed forward, they actually go forward and try to get the single check. Obviously, the goal right now is to get the black check, but no one can do that right now. Why? Because there's only 36 single checks. Now, if someone combines all of their and burns all of the checks, they're going to get the single checks. This is also a really good thread by Young Burrs. He basically gave a thread on the checks and explained a little bit how they work. But basically, they're artist-controlled multiple canvases, because you can control whether you want to burn them or simply just keep your check and just sell it on the market. And in my opinion, this is what kind of gives the checks its value, because the guys or the people purchasing the checks itself actually have a say and a control in the art. Because let's say, for example, I buy one of these checks and I'm like, hey, I want one of these checks, but I don't want it to go to the 40 checks or the 20 checks. I just want to keep it as is. Someone can do that. But if they want the black check, they can accumulate a bunch of these and eventually get the black check, where only 3 of these get this. So there's a lot of game theory involved. There haven't been really any other NFT collections that have gone in depth like this, but that's a quick overview of checks. Now let's jump into the opepens. Now Opepen actually launched as a free mint. Anyone can mint this, and the total supply came out to around 15,984 or something like that. Yeah, so the total supply was 15,984. It was 16 short of the 16,000. So initially when this dropped, and you can kind of tell in the price action to see exactly what happened to it, and it's not going to show because, well, it's recording me, so the screen is slow. But as you can see here, there's a peak in time, or a point in time, where it was going nuts and ham. And this is when checks was going nuts and ham, and there was a lot of speculation. People were like, oh, this is going to be the next checks. This is going to do this, this, and this. Well, there actually wasn't a story for Opepen. The story didn't develop until around April 20th, when Jack Butcher dropped some more alpha. Actually, it was around April 18th, and I'll show you guys that later in this video. Basically, with these Opepens, it was kind of like, hey, look, checks was successful, so will Opepen. And he released it, and he was like, oh, there's nothing much. Let me just go and give some hints. And people were all speculating and thinking what it's going to do. But then Jack dropped some alpha. And the alpha came into play where it was like, hey, initial mint reached 15,984. We're going to airdrop 16 others just to make it even, so the even 16,000. So now this is where the mechanics begin and how we can play this game. How this template works is that there is going to be 80 different PFPs out of 200 different mint sets. So if we go to the sets, as you can see here, and you click through them, it will show a total of 200. Right here you can see it's set 10. Currently we are at, well, past set 4. And the demand for these is nuts and ham. As you can see here, anyone with a 1 edition, it went and opted in for 114. I'll go and explain this later, but the TLDR is that there's only one of these 114 people that can actually get one of these PFPs. And for the 4 one, there's only 4 that get the 4 edition opt-in, which out of the 516, only 4 are chosen. And I mean, just in general, just looking at the percentage and oversubscription of these, it's going like hotcakes, like 12,000% over what it should be. Whereas they're only aiming for 200%. When it aims for 200% on the demand, then they go ahead and mint, do the reveal, and yada, 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 goes on. However, if the demand is less than 200% within one of the brackets, the set will be replaced, so they give it different art. This is the second version of the art. This was the first version. This was actually Jack Butcher's collection. And to understand and see what value this has, you can actually go to the collections and look at the artists. So you can filter it by Bats, Jack Butcher, SD1, VV. And the floor for these Opepens is about 1 ETH. However, if you are randomly selected, you can turn that one little ETH of that Opepen, of that random Opepen that hasn't opted in any of them, you can turn that into 3 ETH plus. So automatically doing multiples. And you can actually opt in simply on this website when they do the reveals. It's opepen.art/sets. And I will drop that in the description below so you guys can check that out. But that is how the Opepens roll. Now, let's go and give you some more information on this. Now, there were a lot of questions regarding to this. And the first is, how much does it cost? Well, to opt in, anyone can opt in. You literally just sign a message and your wallet is opted in. And you can select how many Opepens you want to drop in there. So as you can see here, this is kind of like the different reveals that you can do. So this is opepening.art. If you opt in and put one of your Opepens into this, when the reveal comes across, you can kind of open a pack of cards, and it's kind of cool how it looks. This is actually how it looks. This is an example of going through it. As you can see, it's like a little fancy card. Yay, you won. Sometimes you don't win, and whatever. You just move on to the next. But any and everyone can opt into it, or they can choose to keep their bare bones Opepen NFT. The last reveal that they did was on May 29th. And the May 29th was with Consensus, and they also did the full circle Opepen. So anyone who got this went gangbusters, and the only person who could have gotten the one of one is the dude who had a single Opepen. Now, this is where some more details get into play. I know it's a bit complex, but that is the whole shtick and the whole deal with Jack Butcher and what he is offering. So if we toggle all of these off, remember this was a free mint. You can go ahead and see all of these that have these bigger squares, they have littlest squares. You can kind of see these different squares. To break this down to tell which edition that you have, this is the square for 40. This is the square for 20. This is the square for 10. This is the square for 5, 4, and then 1. So if you go ahead and take a look at this, the only person who can get this PFP is the guy who has the one with a square, which is literally just this tiny little square. And to tell what you have, all you got to do is look at your Opepen and see which squares it gives you. In fact, there are differences in prices. If you want to look at the prices of 40s, obviously those are going to be at floor price. But if you look at the prices of 20s, those are going to sell at a little bit of a premium. You can see here they're selling at 1.069 ETH, whereas the floor is 0.97. And if you go to the 10 are going to have an even more of a premium because they're more scarce. And then you have the 5, which is also more scarce, the 4, and the 1. So if you are filtering through and trying to get some of these for like a discount, whatever, if those are selling at floor price, those are actually supposed to be trading at a premium. So good luck if you do find one of those. And obviously the ones sell at the highest premium. These sell for 13.8 ETH. And there is a reason for this. If you have the 1, and let's say, for example, you have it on the Jack Butcher, it's for sale for 299 ETH. But if you take that off and take a look at it, you can see here a blank one is selling for 13.8. So if you had some of these Opepens from the random mint and you got lucky or whatever, you could be sitting on a hefty stack. So good luck if you got one of those. But going back into the details on this, there's only going to be one of these. There's only going to be 40 of the 40 editions. There's only going to be 20 of the 20 of, well, basically the Opepen 5. And there's only going to be 10 of the 10s. And basically it's 6 different little PFPs, and there's 6 different versions, but there are going to be duplicates. So if you want the 101, you got to have the one little square. And you can see that's the points where the opt-ins come in. So if you get selected and get one of these, good for you, great job. And if you go on to the Opepen or Opepening, you can go ahead and check out the reveals here, or you can go ahead and check out the next sets to see when they will be dropping. To see when the next one drops, the best thing to do is kind of just follow Jack Butcher and see what he talks about, see what's next. But just follow this guy and see what's going in. Now, is there any risk to opting in and if you get nothing? Well, no. It's just the gas fee, the sign, and whatever. You get your Opepen back. Sorry, you didn't win. Whatever, you can move on to the next. This kind of gives a great overview of the Opepen NFT. As you can see here, there's 16,000 of them. There's going to be 200 sets, 80 edition, 1 by 1, 6 styles. So there's 6 styles. Again, with the single one, like the 101s, there's only going to be 1. With the 4, there's 4. With the 5, there's 5. With the 10, there's 10, so on. Random airdrop metadata, so anyone can be selected. And then the holder custom and freeze metadata. So anyone can be selected. It's just not like, hey, Snap, you're the lucky guy, you win. No, well, actually, yeah, it is. It's anyone who's lucky. So if you are selected, that metadata becomes permanent. And if you've got any of the 80, which is actually a good thing, the reason why it's 80 is because you got 40, 20, 10, 5, 4, 1. So yeah, you go ahead and basically get the totals based on that. It's going to be 80 different PFPs released each and every time. So you're going to have, again, this is the math on it. You have 200 different sets that will be revealed and 80 in each. If you do 80 times 20, it's going to be 16,000. So there's going to be a total of the 16,000 PFPs, and that's why you're seeing some more traction in the Opepens recently, because people are speculating, they're wanting to get in, and they're actually wanting to get a portion of the sets and maybe reveal a winner and get one that sells for multiple ETH. But as you can see, as these are oversubscribing each and every time, it'll be interesting to see how the game theory plays out. But that is a brief overview of Jack Butcher, checks, Opepen, and what to make of it. And you kind of choose what you want to do. And to not opt in or to Opepen. As always, time will tell. We'll see what happens. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you guys drop a like, subscribe to the channel. It takes time to put together these videos. And if you want to support the channel as well as join the Discord group and kill 2 birds with 1 stone, you guys can do that in the description below. That is the Patreon link. Look forward to having you there. Basically, what you can expect to get is exclusive content I don't show on YouTube, as well as a exclusive Discord group where you can join and chat with a bunch of other DeFi degens just like you. Yes, we were minting and grabbing some Opepens back in the early days of January. Shout out to Bartley. He is on Twitter as well. I don't know if he's still degenning up. I think he was going to touch grass for a few, but it was Opepen and checks. I remember him making the call. That was a lot of fun. Proverbs chapter 10 verses 15. The wealth of the rich is their fortified city, but poverty is the ruin of the poor. Be good, be righteous. Peace.